Welcome to the Happier Attorney, the podcast where we talk to guests about flat fees and, more importantly, how to create a firm and a life that fits you, that works for you, and how to change your mindset from maybe the attorney mindset to perhaps a more creative, healthier mindset. And my guest today is Crystal McDonough. And Crystal is a go-getter. She's an attorney in Colorado and Wyoming, and she has built a practice, a very specialized practice that generally is only for big firm attorneys. She has built it herself in mineral and gas rights and land use, all of those things. And she did it with 3 kids in an RV and 2 dogs and a husband, where she spent most of her time practicing law in an RV, traveling the country. So, please stay tuned. And if you want to learn more about working with Crystal, all of her information will be in the comments below. We met probably close to a year ago. We talked about my course and you started my course. But one of the reasons that I wanted to interview you today is you do not think like an attorney. You have a very successful law firm. You do a very specialized practice with mineral rights and oil and gas and all the things that I don't know anything about. Like in theory, I guess I knew people practice that, but and we'll get into your practice. But before you started law school, you had your own business for 15 years. And tell me about, I assume there's a moment or a series of moments when you realized that the way attorneys think is not how you thought, and what that process was when I assume. So you tell me what that looked like for you.
So you're absolutely right. I spent 15 years doing other things, not law. And I really got an entrepreneur bug at a very young age, and had some success and had a lot of fun, had some adventures along the way. And in 2008, when the economy really took a dive, it impacted our family too, as it impacted a lot of other families. So I decided to go to law school at that point with the goal of opening a law firm, because I've always owned my own businesses. And so it never even, the option of going to work for somebody else was not really part of my plan or my goal. And at that time, I had already intended on treating it just like any other business that I had worked and experienced building and enjoyed operating. So I went into the whole process with that picture in my head as I'm just going to go start another business. But to do it, I have to have a law degree. So I really didn't go into it thinking about law as this mystic profession that has these, attorneys have these magical powers and all of these things. I went into it with the perspective of I'm going to start a new business. I see a need for real practical minded attorneys who are accessible, and I'm going to fill that. I looked at it as a service industry. My favorite comparison is comparing attorneys to mechanics, which attorneys hate, by the way, but it's true. Mechanics are highly specialized at what they do. You probably can't go fix your car. There's too many, even if you were mechanically inclined, there's so many computerized things. You've got to have specialized testers. You've got to have all these special things. My dad was a mechanic, so I have some background information on this stuff. But it's really no different than any other service industry. It's just a specialized service industry. You've got to have the degree. You've got to have special training, special skills, and special insight, just like somebody like a mechanic. And other service industries are the same way. We're here to serve people. We're here to provide a service, help people. That's really the basis of what we do. So when I went into law school, that's the perspective I took into it. As you can imagine, even in law school, that was not a very popular perspective, even in law school. And I was a non-traditional student. I had 3 kids when I went to law school. So, I came at it even from a just a completely different background and perspective. No one in my family is a lawyer. I'm first generation, a college graduate. So, I just went at this like I did anything else, with a very blue collar attitude. We're going to go in there and we're going to get it done.
And when you, I'm sure you have bumped up against attorneys with, there's no better word for it. We can rationalize it all we want, but it's fear.
Mm.
We have this fear mindset, and I get why. I mean, that's part of our gig, is to make sure that we know where all of the landmines are, where they possibly could be, and warn our clients. Arguably, I don't think that works well in the law when that's your sole focus, but it certainly doesn't work when you own a business. And if you own a law firm, you own a business, period. How do you address that? Or did you ever have that fear mindset?
I think every person in the world has fear that they battle with. It doesn't matter whether you are an attorney or, a waitress or a doctor, mechanic. It doesn't really matter. I think everybody battles fear, and it's just how you approach it, I think, that drives who you will become and how successful you'll be. I think as attorneys, we're inherently have this built-in fear from law school, this driving thing that if you do one toe out of line, or if you make one tiny mistake, it's your career forever. That's not true.
It's not
true. But law school is, the Socratic method is so inherently ingrained in the law school experience, and which, by the way, I don't think is useful at all. But that's a whole nother story. But attorneys come out of law school with they're just beat over the head with this constant fear. And I think that's part of the reason why attorneys also make poor business people, because they're so afraid of doing one little thing. And if one mistake, we are people, we make mistakes. Doctors make mistakes. Lawyers make mistakes. Waitresses make mistakes. Mechanics make mistakes. Manufacturers make mistakes. Because we're human, we're not perfect. And that's why we have insurance. I had the best conversation with a CPA the other day. And he said, I'm not worried. If I make a mistake, that's why I have my insurance. If I make a mistake, that's what they're there for, to cover it.
And we are not brain surgeons. Okay. The chances of someone actually dying if we make a mistake are slim to none. And even if we make a big mistake, it's generally fixable. There's generally some layers there, but even worst case scenario, it's not fixable. It's not, whatever.
Yeah. And I think that's why lawyers don't do well as business people, because they're so fearful for even just their day-to-day practice, which is, so then when you add the other layer of being a business owner on top of that, oh my gosh. Being a business owner is about making mistakes. Being a business owner is about learning what works for your industry, for your clients, for your customers, for your staff, for your team. Being a business owner is an imperfect prospect. It's an imperfect practice. And
it's like you have to treat it like a science experiment, without emotion, without, I'm going to try this, see what works, see what doesn't. Oh, that didn't work. Okay. Did any part of it work? Did it work up until okay, we're going to try something else
and make adjustments.
And I see so many attorneys just going, oh, that didn't work. And we'll get to flat fees in a bit, but it almost makes me laugh when people with no education, no training, nothing, will just try flat fees. It miraculously doesn't work when you just, don't know what you're doing and you just try it. And then they're like, flat fees don't work. I'll never do it again. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So let me get this straight. This would be like you trying to make bread when you've never made bread ever. You've never watched somebody make it.
Mm-hmm.
You have no experience whatsoever. you don't have a recipe. You're just going to throw some water and flour, maybe some yeast. And then you wonder why you don't have a loaf of bread in a few hours.
I think that part of the problem is for lawyers specifically. I think law school teaches a very box-centered idea that you work within this four walls of this box, the four corners of the contract. I mean, everything is always about the four corners, right? There's all these boundaries, and they're made up boundaries, but it's this box that attorneys feel like they have to live in, and there's zero flexibility, there's zero creativity. There are some attorneys out there, so let's not just throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? But there are a lot of really good creative attorneys out there, and a lot of attorneys who are running successful businesses. But for the most part, attorneys, they have a hard time looking outside of this box and thinking creatively. I've been mentoring attorneys for about 7 years on how to really figure out what they want out of their law practice and their life, and then create a plan that works for them. And
let's talk about that, because one of the reasons that I wanted to interview you, I like you and I like talking with you, but you are the epitome of the happier attorney in that you didn't look and say, okay, this is what success means as an attorney, and so I'm going to go do this and this and this and this. You, from the beginning, said, what does success mean to me? How do I define success? And make no mistake, you have created a very financially successful practice, a well-respected practice, a practice that any attorney with the traditional notion of success would look at and say, oh, she did it. She did it, and relatively quickly. But here's where your claim to fame is you did that with 3 kids while traveling in an RV most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me about that experience, and tell me about the process of figuring out what success meant to you, and then figuring out how to fit a practice to mold that idea of success.
So when I went to law school with 3 kids, my youngest was 3. They were 3, 6, and 7 when I started law school. So, that's law school is hard enough. Throw kids. If I had known how hard it was going to be, honestly, I don't know that I would have done it. And I did my master's and my JD at the same time. And I worked as a graduate assistant for the School of Energy Resources. So I had this 3-part program, and I worked at a law firm. I did the whole thing in 2.5 years.
That's insane.
It was insane. And I don't know how I did. I don't have a whole lot of memory from my second year, to be fair. And I did take some summer classes between my second and third year. But, when I went to law school, we had lived a very traditional life before law school. I had my businesses that I had some fun doing, but I wasn't the primary income earner. My husband was. And I had 3 kids. I was having babies. I was working from home. I was juggling all of these things. When I started law school, I didn't want that traditional life anymore. I wanted to completely throw it out, start from scratch, and just live this dream life. And we had a really good friend who had homeschooled his kids. He was highly successful, had a major company, and he challenged our thinking along the way. And it happened during law school. And he said, we homeschooled our kids because my job was really demanding. And he said, we decided we wanted to travel with the kids. When I could take time off, it didn't always fit with their school schedule. So we decided when they were studying about the Great Wall of China, we'd go to China. And he challenged our thinking, and he said we traveled the country in an RV, and we went to state parks and museums. And when the kids were learning about U.S. history, we went to D.C. and just gave us a lot of different perspective and showed us that really we could explore. Maybe we couldn't take the kids to China. If we couldn't afford that, maybe instead we could go take them to a museum and go on some other adventures with what we could afford. And so my husband and I really started talking about this idea that could we really homeschool the kids and start a new company and be a lawyer and travel, and we started adding all these ands on all these things that we would love to do. We love riding bikes and mountain biking and things like that. So we started adding all of these things to our wish list. And so we started building this picture, and we're dreamers. We talk and we talk and we talk. We'll talk for things about years. And we looked at RVs for probably 6 or 7 years before we finally bought one. And I think just allowing ourselves to dream of what life could be. Once I started the firm, we were scraping by. It's like starting any other business. They tell you don't plan on making any money for the first 3 years. I took a paycheck in day one. I had a paycheck month one, which was highly unusual. And it went from there. And I think after the first 9 months of starting the firm, I won my first case in a Wyoming court. And I called my husband from Wyoming, who lived in Colorado. I practiced between both states. And I called him and I said, I won. Meet me at the RV store. We're buying our RV today. And so that's what we did. And the first one, it was, nothing special. It was a Keystone Bullet, a bumper pole camper, and it had the bunk beds in the back end for the kids. And, we had the dogs and the kids. And so we just started taking these weekend adventures and going up to the mountains or going up to Wyoming, just going around different places, getting comfortable with this idea that we could travel. And then we took a 2-week trip up to Yellowstone and up around that part of Wyoming, which is beautiful. And then we started planning longer trips. And then it was 3 weeks and then 4 weeks. And the biggest trip we took was in that second year. We were gone for 6 weeks. And I wanted to take this. I planned it about 6 months in advance. We island hopped. We went down to the Gulf Coast, island hopped all the way down into Florida, down into the Keys, and then all the way back. We had so much fun. It was so freeing not to be tied to anything and not to feel like I had to be in an office because that's what tradition says.
Yeah.
Or that
well, so many of the times, sorry to interrupt you. I wanted to come back to, he challenged your thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is so key. We attorneys, we get into this just tunnel vision where this is all we can see. And I hear with attorneys all the time, oh, I can't do that. I couldn't do that. I mean, when we're talking about like taking a Friday afternoon off, oh, I can't do that. And I'll challenge them, would you actually be committing malpractice if you took Friday afternoon off? No. But we get into this, I can't do that. And it's absolute nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
We lie to ourselves all of the time.
Well, and we make our clients' panic and emergencies and fears our panic, emergencies, and fears.
Right.
And I think that is...
Which isn't helpful to the client, by the way.
It's not healthy for anyone. It's really not healthy for anyone. I think that was one of the big lessons that I've learned the first couple of years of practicing was their panic is not my panic. Their emergency is not my emergency. And being realistic about what I can do, what I can't do. And I have been guilty of working too many hours. I mean, my staff and my team will tell you, they tell me to take more time off all the time. That is just, but part of my problem is I love what I do so much. And I love building this business. I love the business of law. I love crafting and honing not only my skills as a lawyer, but I love building my business. I love working on my business. I pore over spreadsheets. I love it. So it's hard for me sometimes to pull myself away because I enjoy it so much. And I enjoy seeing the fruit of my labor and my planning and all of my hard work actually happening and being realized. And,
But it didn't happen overnight, did it?
No. No, not at all.
The other thing I see attorneys doing is, now, I mean, when I started, we didn't have the business of law. Like we didn't have practice management books and coaches. We had Jay Foonberg's book, and that was it. And so now that is changing, but I see so many attorneys trying one thing, expecting it to work immediately. And that's not how it works. So tell me about the falling down. Tell me about the struggles where you're like, oh my gosh, is this really working?
Well, I started off with a partner, and because I hadn't practiced law, I had run businesses, but hadn't practiced law before. So I had a partner for a while, for about 4 years. And it was a really good experience for me. I learned a lot through that time because he had 20 years of practice experience, but didn't have a business head, a business mind. And so it was a really good fit for the time because I ran most of the business side. I'm a rainmaker. I brought in a lot of clients, but he was a good attorney, and I learned a lot of just practical skills from him. And I think, so here's the first thing I guess this is more like the second thing I tell attorneys. The first thing is, what's your dream? What do you really want? Right. The second thing
what do you really want? Not what you think
right.
You're supposed to want.
Right. What do you really want? Right. And then, but then the next thing after that is, okay, do you have the legal skills? Do you have the skills, whatever skills that those are that you need to reach that goal? And I knew that I had this dream of owning and operating this really fantastic, amazing law firm with this great team. But I also knew that I didn't quite have all the skills I needed to get there. So what I focused on first was the skills, because you have to be very realistic to reach your goals. It's just because you say, oh, I want to do this, it doesn't just poof happen. I mean, how many times do we want to tell our clients, I don't have a magic wand, I cannot make your problem go away. I can help you work through it. I can minimize risk. I can increase security. I can do this. I can do that. We can contract around this. We can negotiate this. But I don't have a magic wand. What's funny is we expect other people around us to have a magic wand, or we think that because we are highly educated people, we think it, we put some hands to it, and then boom, it's going to happen. So right. I spent 4 years really just honing and learning my craft to become a good lawyer, because I knew that without being a really good lawyer, I wouldn't have the foundation that I needed to build a good business. Because the business of law, it's a service industry. You're only as good as your service. And so your reputation, your business, your growth, attracting good talent, all of that is dependent on the quality of your service and your reputation of your service. So I spent 4 years just studying, and I went to CLE after CLE. And I was, if I wasn't on my computer reading and studying, if I didn't have a legal work that I needed to do for a client, I was studying, I was learning. And anything I was interested in that I could possibly learn about law. How does this area of law relate to this area of law? How do these go together? How do I make myself better at this? Oh, I see this attorney did this. Why did they do that? And I would just studied for 4 years. And it may not feel like a long time, but when you're really applying yourself that intensely for that amount of time, I really approached that like I did my bar exam. I studied constantly. My family will tell you that I just never stopped. I either had a book in my hand, I was reading blogs on my phone, I had my tablet. It was a constant study for me.
And this is still while you're RVing.
Yeah. Because, you could do that really from anywhere. That's the whole point of it. You don't have to be sitting in an office. Right now, I'm in my home office. Where I would prefer to be right now is out on my patio overlooking our property. But I don't have very good light at the moment out there. So, and my lighting is not the best today either. But anyway.
And quite frankly, I do a better job when I am out.
I do.
There's something about nature where I absorb it more.
And the fresh air and
right.
Just, it helps me just to think more creatively, and I don't feel as stressed. I feel like I can just focus on the issues and what I need to do to solve that puzzle or work on that. Analysis is like my favorite part of law. I love solving puzzles and figuring out, how do we make this issue? How do we work around this issue? But yeah, I did all of this while traveling, and my husband made a little desk for me in our RV. But most of the time, unless I was, doing something where I just needed to be completely without interruption, most of the time I would be sitting at the picnic table, and we homeschooled at the same time. So there'd be times where I'd be sitting at the table working on a project. My kids would be on the opposite side of the table. They'd be working on their school. And my husband would be, doing what he was doing. We'd all just be happy, enjoying our time together, quietly working on our projects, what we were working on. It's
amazing to me when you're talking about being creative. I will tell my clients, and when I say clients, I mean attorneys, if you're having a problem, because we're so in our head, go take a 10-minute walk.
Yeah.
Even that just clears your head, much less every great idea. I'm pretty creative. Every great idea I've ever had has been when I'm out there.
Yeah.
It can be trying to figure something out and mulling over and just going. When I separate and I get into nature, just separate myself, sometimes even just go to a hotel room. It's magic.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if you're living that, I bet the ideas were coming fast and furious.
So that's, we started this traveling, and our kids were racing BMX. For anyone who knows what that is, bicycle, motocross, BMX. Your kids are on these smaller bicycles and they race around this track. And anyway, it's they got into that after we started traveling in the RV, and then there was national races all over the country. So that was part of our travel then, was our kids were traveling. We were chasing all these races all across the country. We were north, south, east, west. I mean, one year we were all the way as far north as you can go, as far south as you can go, as far east and west as you could go, coast to coast. I mean, we were all over the country. I think that year we were actually on the road a total of 6 months combined, but it was all broken up into, a month here, 2 months there, a few weeks here, just kind of around the country like that. But I think that the thing that is great about it is it's not just for you and your health, it's good for everybody. I mean, our family is closer than, when people meet us, they are amazed at how close we are as a family. And my son will be 20 in July, my oldest. And then my daughter, my middle, she is 18. And then my youngest is 15. So we're now in a different stage of life. We've traveled. The older two are in college. So we don't have the same travel schedule anymore. Everything is kind of changed for us. We're on a new adventure.
I talk about a friend of mine in my third book, Tidy Up or Simplify, which has nothing to do with the law, but it does have to do with what you really want in life and possessions. And she and her husband had 3 kids. They were financially very well off. They lived on Bainbridge Island, which is right outside of Seattle, a pretty wealthy area. And they had a big house. They had, what everybody says they want, and they weren't happy.
Mm-hmm.
And they sold their house. They went and moved on a friend's property in a little cabin. And it was a small cabin. They only did it for a couple years before they bought a house, but not a big house again. She said it was the best experience of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
They were forced to be together.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't one of them going off to their room in the evening by themselves. They were literally forced to be together. It was out of a fairy book.
Well, that's how living in an RV is. I mean, when you've got 3 kids, 2 dogs, and a mom and dad all living in this tiny RV, there's very little privacy. And now ours is, now we upgraded. We had a 5th wheel. Now it's a 40-foot. I call it the condo on wheels because it's really nice. I mean, I have a sleep number bed in my RV because I have a sleep number bed in my house, and I sleep better on that. So that's what I put in there. But it's got 2 bedrooms, so a bunk room for the girls, and then our son slept on a fold down couch folded into a bed. So you don't really have a lot of room. You have to learn to get along, how to have fun together. Life is so much simpler. You can't take a lot of stuff. Right. I don't need a lot of stuff. I got all these books and all these things on my shelves. I don't need them. I never look at them. I don't even know why I have them, except for sometimes I think I'll need it for some reason. But you don't. When I go on the road, literally, I take my computer. I have a little tiny portable printer scanner just in case. Occasionally, I have to print something and sign it because they don't want an electronic signature. It's very rare. And then I have a little tiny shredder just in case I have to print something and then shred it. And then I take a notebook. And my notebooks, I have a really small little notebook. I don't need a lot.
I assume that the learning curve was high. I'm sure that there were things that you had to work out with staff and, the logistics.
Yeah.
But you didn't quit. You kept going. You worked it out.
There are challenges. I think, I spoke at a conference last year during COVID, an online conference. And one of the comments, my spot was just talking about, building the practice and what it takes to do that. And someone talked to me afterwards, one of the comments, and they said, I really thank you for talking about how much work it takes. It's hard work. And I think that's the thing that's missed from a lot of people. And when I coach and I mentor people, that's one of the first things I tell them is you're going to have to do the work. It's not going to just happen because you took my course or you worked with me to help you put together your plan. You have to do it. You have to every day, step by step. I've hired people from the road. I've fired people from the road. I've had to deal with staff turnover. I've had to deal with budget shortfalls. I've had to deal with unexpected client issues. I've had to deal with unexpected staffing issues. Things just come up. You have to learn how to deal with it. You cannot get emotional about it. I think that is something that is hard for people in general, because when they're afraid of something, it makes them nervous. It makes them it makes them react emotionally to the situation instead of rationally and with care and deliberation and intention. And you really, when you own a business, you have to almost think through that lens of, okay, X happened. A perfect example. I got a panicked email from one of my staff on Monday at 5:30. So I just got the message from the front desk. That's what we call our secretarial staffing service. I just got a call from the front desk. Somebody said that somebody's impersonating our law firm and they're claiming to be a collections company. And she was freaking out and she's, oh my gosh, it was 5:30. You can't get a hold of anyone then. Right. And I'm like, okay, so I'm thinking, well, my first thought was, oh gosh, it's always something. And
right. There is always going to be something.
Yeah, there's always something. And so my first thought was, oh, great. Okay. So my husband looked at me and said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I'll figure it out in the morning. And so yesterday morning, I called this person and I said, now explain to me, tell me why you think somebody's impersonating us. Tell me why you think that somebody is trying to do collections using our name and, just trying to get to the bottom of what's happening. Well, turns out it was a newspaper publishing editor from a really tiny little town in Wyoming. And she had gotten one of our press releases. And our press release was talking about some issues that are happening right now and just something that we want people to be aware of. And if, just a press release. It was a simple press release. It was nothing. And so anyway, as I started talking to her, I realized I was dealing with somebody else who was running a business who was very fearful, and her husband's identity had been stolen at one point. It was something she didn't recognize. It was from somebody she didn't know, an email. It was from our marketing person. So come to find out, all it was a press release. She didn't know what it meant. She overreacted. She acted out of fear and confusion and then jumped to some really crazy conclusions. Nobody is impersonating our law firm. Nobody is trying to do collections using our name. It's like a perfect example of somebody who's running a business who reacted emotionally and jumped to some big conclusions, created a bunch of, crazy issues for people. I mean, my staff was like, I don't know what to do. I said, I'll take care of it. It was nothing. It was a big fat nothing.
And most people, including myself, would have, that entire evening would have been ruined.
Yeah. For most people, I think it would have. And honestly, for me, 4 years ago, I probably would have been panicked and working, because I have learned to be calm. It's something I've had to learn. Some of it just comes with time and experience and practice. It doesn't just happen overnight. And I think that's the thing for any business owner, no matter what it is, but for lawyers to understand is none of this is going to happen overnight. You have to be very patient, and you have to be willing to learn from your experiences. Like you said earlier, look at what happened and say, okay, what part of this did I do well? What part of this could I improve on? What part of that was in my control? And what part of that was outside of my control?
And be consistent. Mm-hmm. You can't do the things once a year and think that that's going to work.
No, I mean, there's been a lot of chatter lately on some of the Facebook pages and questions from people who are solos or small firms wanting to try to improve their firms and try to improve what they're doing. A lot of questions about marketing lately. And I think it's because, there's a lot of people out there selling I had success and talk to me. Wanting to be a coach. I want to sell you a course. They had a year of success by accident. And now they think that they might have stumbled onto one thing that worked for a year, and they reaped some benefits out of that for a year, maybe a year and a half, maybe it's even bled into 2 years. But what really defines success is that consistency year over year over year, not a one-time flash in the pan, but consistency year over year over year.
To be really clear about what success means. I hear a lot on Facebook advertising of, $1 million. Well,
what if you don't want $1 million?
What if you don't really want $1 million? Number one.
Yeah.
Number two, what does that mean? Is that gross? Is that net? Does that mean $1 million because you have 30 staff people? Do you want 30 staff people? Like, I would rather throw acid in my eye than have 30 staff people. Yeah. So, what does that mean?
That's the problem. That's the problem. Is success is defined differently by everybody. And so that's why I think you have to be really careful about the noise that you listen to and the people who are influencers in law. You need to find people to listen to connect with, who are doing what you want to do. And I'll give you an example. I have hired someone to help me with my business. I don't run my business like a traditional law firm. So every place that I look for inspiration or help or education for me as a business owner is outside of law. I have never hired anyone within law intentionally, because I think that their perspective it's not what I want. It's not what I'm looking for. It's not that it's bad. It's just not what I'm looking for. So you have to find the people who are doing what you want to do and learn from them. So the person that I have hired, he's kind of like our contract CFO. He's our business consultant, and he is fantastic. But he comes from Fortune 500 companies, from C-suite. He's been highly successful with massive national and international companies. on various aspects of running those companies. That's what I am looking for. My firm, I have big goals for my firm. I want to take my firm national. I want to grow this firm into something really cool. And I have a very specific vision on what I want to do and how I want to get there. And so I needed somebody who understands that picture. And I sought somebody out with that specific thing in mind. So,
and it's okay if you actually don't want to grow your firm.
Absolutely.
By the way.
Absolutely.
You don't have this idea that you have to be growing your firm and growing your firm and growing your firm to be successful or to be, is absolute rubbish.
Some people that I work with, they want to be able to, especially during the pandemic, some of the people that I was working with had to figure out, how do I work from home and homeschool my kids? Because everyone was having to do school at home with their kids. Some of them chose to do a traditional homeschool where they had their own materials. Others were doing school at home with the public school or private schools directing that work. Either way, parents had to make a shift. And so a lot of what I was doing was helping families figure out how to do that, just simply because I've done it. And, right. And I, even within my own staff, in my own team, we had attorneys and staff and paralegals that had all of a sudden had kids that were home, they were having to homeschool. So figuring out how to adjust schedules and how to make things shift and work. And by the way, we all work from home. For 9 years, when I started this law firm, the whole goal, if I'm going to travel, if I'm going to work from the road or from home, then my entire team should be able to do that, not just me.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So every single one of my attorneys, my staff, my paralegals, they all have that freedom to do that. Now, when I hire somebody, I always want to know, what is it that you need to be successful? What is your goal? Because even within our own team, that's my goal. I want to help my staff, my team reach their goals. I mean, that's just who we are. So I have one attorney who really prefers to be in an office. Actually, I have two attorneys that really prefer to be in an office, one part-time, the other full-time. And so for those two attorneys, we have offices specifically for them so that they can go to, because that's what they need and want to be successful. I need the freedom and flexibility to be on the road. That's what I need to be successful. There is no one size fits all. And I think that's the approach that we should be taking in law, in our business, not we're all going to work in this one box. And I don't need to micromanage. I hire people who are smart, competent, and know how to do their job. Now, do you occasionally have problems and have to maybe say, this isn't a good fit for you or for me? Yep, because it's going to happen, because we're human and we're people. But you continue to hire people who are like-minded, who have a vision for doing what you do and working with the team. And, you just keep getting up every morning and doing what you do.
And you've gotten some pushback. I've seen some comments online of, oh, God bless attorneys. Oh, she must have been from, a big firm, or she must have had money, or, these are just some of the comments that I've seen. And how do you, as a person, deal with that? I assume you don't engage, but how do you deal with that and just stay in your lane and not let the noise get in? Especially when you're doing something out of the box. Yeah. I mean, I've certainly gotten pushback. I'm telling an entire, as are you, telling an entire culture, there's another way over here that's completely the opposite of what you've been doing. There's a lot of ego tied up with the old way. So how do you deal with that when you're doing something out there? And I've even had students, clients, attorneys get pushback when they're using flat fees, they're doing it well. So that means, Tuesday afternoon, they're going home. Mm-hmm. And they've gotten snide comments from other attorneys. Oh, must be nice. Yeah, that's why I'm doing this. So how do you personally deal with that?
I don't engage. That's kind of my number one rule. I learned early on, if you engage, you're just creating more chaos and frustration and angst for yourself. And it just wasn't worth it. And I really have just decided that those people are not, I mean, they're not like-minded. They're ignorant. They don't understand. They don't get it. And we're not ever going to probably be friends. We're not ever going to see eye to eye because I just live and think differently.
But at the end of the day, I think the basis of their comments are fear.
Absolutely. And fear. And I think there's not only that, I think they really do believe they're doing it the right way. And I think that's because the training for lawyers is so, I mean, it is just so entrenched in the old ways. It is so entrenched. And a lot of attorneys just, they feel like that is the only way. And if you are not doing it that way, you are somehow doing something wrong. They really do believe that. And so I don't know that it's always fear. I mean, I think sometimes fear comes into it, but I think sometimes it's just, this is the way you have to do it, especially when it comes to flat fees. I think that's an issue. I was speaking to an ethics counsel about something completely unrelated to flat fees. And I happened to mention that we had done part of our work for this client on a partial flat fee, and then the other work was done hourly because of the type of case that it was. And he started freaking out. And this is a really old guy. And I said, I'm not worried about that at all. He said, but you have to do this and this. I said, it's done. I know what I'm doing. And he's like, well, what about this or that? And I said, the clients are happy. I said, it's a non-issue. That's not even why I called you. I called you because I wanted to ask you about this particular thing. Let's focus on that. But he couldn't get off this idea. And I said, well, I appreciate your time. You know, I'll call somebody else. And because I think it's just, they really do believe that is the way you have to do it. And
it's interesting. One of my first, she actually was my first podcast, was an ethics attorney. And she just kept laughing because of the ridiculousness of us as attorneys. We'll even make up ethical rules that aren't there. Oh, you can't do that. Oh, really? Is there an ethical rule that says, well, no, but the bar doesn't like it? Do you have some authority? I mean, we're attorneys. We base our life on authority. Well, do you have some authority or evidence to support that conclusion that you just stated? No. But they don't, I don't think they'd like it. So you're telling me that the Bar Association, can you imagine that ethics hearing? Well, we don't like that you did that. Well, is there a rule against that? Well, no. You didn't violate a rule, but we don't like it. I mean, can you imagine how that would go? It's absurd, but we do that all of the time. And by the way, the bar loves flat fees. Just
when I started my law firm, because I'm licensed in Wyoming and Colorado. In Wyoming, Wyoming is, it's a small state, small number of practitioners. It's a tight community, and a lot of really good lawyers there. But they were very fearful of me not working in a physical office all day. And it goes back to, I remember even just in my ethics class in law school, it was taught by a very, very well-respected, very good attorney. I mean, he was, he literally did write the book on ethics. It's this thick. and he's amazing and smart, but his book is all based on, it's based on the rule. It's based on, it's based on real thing. But one of the things that there's a whole section on is in your office about, making sure that you not inadvertently disclosing confidential client information. And it was this whole big, we had spent all this time just in law school about this, about how you have to be careful even in your own physical office. I just took that same approach to working from home or from the road. As long as you have to apply the same practical skills in your office. What if you had a client walk into your office and saw another client's information? the same thing, same practical aspects from working from home. You just apply it to that space instead of.
And so what was the fear about you working on the road?
I think, it was just it was an unknown to them. And so I had to do, I had to put together a memo on how I was going to do it and how I wasn't going to break any of the ethical rules. And
Wow.
so I think I really was the first person to do this in Wyoming, which I don't even know if they remember, because a lot of the people who were asking for this are not even there anymore at the bar.
So people are actually asking you.
They were very concerned. Wow. They were very concerned that I was going to be breaking a ton of ethical rules working from the road. And so I had to show them. They were terrified of cloud storage. They were terrified of not having a physical server in the office. That was a big concern for them. How do you do backups? How do you protect your data and your information? There was a lot of, and there were some practical questions there, but you know what it did is it forced me to put together a business plan.
Right.
Which was probably the best thing I did. It was the best thing I did. I put together this plan on how I was going to do it. I spent months working on this plan, and I showed it to the bar, and they said, okay, well, that looks reasonable to us. It looks like you're following all the rules, so we're good. Now they've embraced all of this. Now, I'm sure if they ever hear me talk about what they made me do, they'd be like, no, we didn't do that. Oh, she's lying. I'm sure they would be appalled that somebody would say that, but that's really what it was 9 years ago. And that it was just that short of time ago in this modern world is crazy, but whatever. It was really good for me because I had to seriously think through all of the ethics of practicing from the road, having a home office where you are storing your information. How do you do that? I had to really think through this process in a very practical way, and I had to really know those ethics rules.
I remember years ago going to a CLE, and one of the presenters on ethics, who, by the way, a lot of the presenters on ethics are not really ethics experts, just so you know, but that the premise was that email was unethical. Anything client email was unethical. Mm-hmm. We've come a long way.
Oh yeah. The Bar Association in Wyoming for a long time thought that credit card payments by clients was unethical. We could not accept credit card payments. Why? That is the most bizarre thing. Show me the rule that says that that's bad or unethical in some way. The rest of the world has been doing credit card payments for 50 plus years on a regular basis, and you don't want to allow that it's just bizarre. So that was a thing that when we set it up from the get-go of accepting credit card payments. And even then I had to show how that was ethical. I had to show how when we sent a LawPay link for payment, that was actually going into the correct account. They were very worried about trust payments going into the trust account.
Right.
So I had to show them exactly. That was in my business plan. What system we're using LawPay. And by the way, what I did at the time was I researched the ABA technology section, and everything that the ABA had endorsed in their technology section are the ones that I used, because that's what I showed the Wyoming Bar. I said, look, ABA has endorsed this. Right. ABA is, they have looked at this and they're endorsing it, and here's why.
And these payment programs are actually a lot safer than, the cash or the check in my drawer that used to be.
Right. I know. It's much more secure because you don't have staff people handling money.
Right.
And I have like a triple check system on our trust accounting, which is awesome. And the fact that I have everything online allows us to have a safer triple check system.
Right.
Because I have our CPA goes and does our reporting on our system. And then from that, he comes in with our office manager, and then they do a secondary system to check. And they're checking it against our records and the bank records. And so our CPA's done one, we do a second one with our internal comparing, and then I do the final sign off. we couldn't have done that if we had all these papers in the office.
Right.
It wouldn't make sense.
Right. So you have a book coming out in September. So tell me about your book.
So I have had so many people ask me how I did it. How did I work from the road in the camper and the RV? And I think there's always been this romantic notion of traveling around the country in an RV. I mean, you see that back there. There was a Lucille Ball movie way back in the day about traveling around the country in a camper, and such a cute movie. I forget the name of it. She's collecting rocks all along the way. It's hilarious. Great comedy. And, and then you've got RV that came out with Robin Williams. I mean, there's always been this romantic idea of traveling, and you hear people talk all the time. They want to retire and they want to travel in their RV all around the country. And so the book is really about my experience.
What's it called?
How I built a thriving law practice while traveling around the country in an RV. Right now, that's the title. So if my editor decides that it needs to be shorter, it's in its first round of edits now with our editor, and so we're hoping September will be the launch date. But it's about our stories and how we did it, and it starts with law school for me, because that's really where this dream was born. Was during law school and the first trips, and the good, the bad, and the ugly, the fun times, and then some of the challenging things that we had to face as a family traveling. Sometimes you just don't want to work and do school, and there are sometimes emergencies come up, and I'd have to fly back home to deal with it.
Right.
Things just happen. So it's really about my story of how I did it, and it gives a lot of pointers on the thought process and the practical things that I did to make that a reality. And so it's kind of a peek into our Building the Perfect Law Firm course as well, because that course was kind of born out of what I've done and how I've done it, and the planning that it took to reach these goals and these dreams. And the point of my story is our lives are constantly changing, and now we're in a different dream. We're changing our path. We're focusing on something new. I have 6.5 acres now, out a little mini ranchette out in Western Colorado, and I have 12 chickens. We have 3 horses, 3 alpacas, 2 goats.
And they are not coming in the RV.
They don't go in the RV. And I have a massive garden. I love gardening. I love growing food and vegetables, and I love being in the dirt. And so we've got a new goal and some new dreams that we're pursuing now. But that doesn't take away from the experiences or the dreams that we had before. It just means we're shifting.
Okay to change them.
It's okay to change. Yeah.
So, and you coach other attorneys. You have a coaching program and a course, and I will put everything in the comments for the link for people to get in touch with you. I think what is most important to end this on is the idea, you're figuring out what success means to you. Yeah. And you're right, it can change. It can change as we move through life. And to, instead of saying, I can't, you've always said, how can I?
Yeah. And I had a very, from an attorney's perspective, from a traditional attorney's perspective, a very successful attorney approached me, someone I knew from DC a while back. And he said, Crystal, how in the world did you do this? Because I also built an energy and natural resource practice from scratch. That's not normally done. Normally you have to go to a firm and you have to go through their, I have just thrown all of those notions of how you're supposed to do everything out the door, and I've done it my own way. He said, how in the world do you have these clients, and do you do these cases? I mean, how do you have this kind of work? And I just looked at him and I said, failure was never an option. Mm-hmm. It's never been an option.
Yeah.
Now, does that mean that I don't make mistakes and I have to readjust? Of course. You have to, all along the way. You have to learn and take steps, and you're going to make mistakes, or you're going to do things that didn't quite work right, but that doesn't mean you failed. You're just going to do it. When I have staff tell me when we're training new people, one of the things that I really is what a pet peeve of mine. I'll try. I'll give it my best shot. No, there's no try. There's no give it your best shot. There's doing. You're just going to do it. And you're going to learn.
And not perfectly the first time or the second time or the 10th time, or maybe the 20th time or the 200th time.
Right. But that's like everybody's leaving when people say, I'm going to try. They leave the back door open instead of going all in. And that's my point is people like, well, I'll give it a shot. But that back door is open and they've got 1 foot out the door and 1 foot in. They're not really fully committed.
Completely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Crystal. It has been an absolute pleasure. It's always just fun talking with you. And I'm going to put in my plug for maybe live workshops on the ranchette in
that's coming.
Colorado.
That's coming. So we have planned, COVID kind of put some of this stuff on hold, but we are planning some master class adventure trips because that's what it's all about. It's about law adventure, having an adventure while we're practicing law. So
Life is short. Life is short.
Life is too short. You should be enjoying it. So we've got
Absolutely.
3. We have possibly 1 coming up at the ranch here in October. It is going to be limited. We're thinking maybe limiting it just to 5 people because we want to foster a sense of community and collaboration. And
I like small groups. I keep small groups.
Yeah.
That's the magic.
So be on the lookout. I think we're going to do one in October here at the ranch, limited 5 people. And then we're already working on our schedule for 2022. I think we're going to be in the Keys in February 2022. We're going to be up in the mountains in Colorado, tiny community up in Colorado, Granby, in July 2022. And then I think we're going to maybe do Cocoa Beach, Space Coast in Florida, in maybe October of 2022.
Awesome. Well, and I'll put the link below so that everybody can get to your site and get on whatever lists and all of the things. Yeah. But thank you so much. And I just want to recognize that it takes a lot of courage to do what you've done. It takes a lot of courage, and you've paid a price, but I think you'd be the first person to say it was well worth it. And so I just want to commend you on your courage to form your own path and to go forward and lead, because that's what you're doing. Whether you had a course or not, whether you have a book or not, you're leading and you're showing other people it's possible.
Yeah.
And you have no idea who you're going to touch. So I want to thank you for that. Well,
and I want to do a quick plug-in for your flat fee course because I have taken it, and that's how we met, really. And I think I would just really encourage attorneys to explore if they're already doing flat fees. It's a good idea to take your course and reinforce, or you can always learn something from somebody. And that's the approach that I've taken. If I'm doing something, I want to learn how to do that one thing better. If I'm not doing something, I want to learn how to start doing it. There's always something you can learn from the people around you. And I took your course because we had been doing some flat fees, and I wanted to hear some new perspective, and I wanted to hear how you were approaching it and how other people are approaching it. And I learned some things that I didn't know. I took away some things that I didn't have, and I added some new tools to our box. And I think that's a huge, valuable thing. So, you can learn something from everybody. And I think that your course was very helpful on learning some new things for our team. And it also gave me some things that I could use to communicate with my team about how we approach flat fees, because I'm not a solo. And so approaching flat fees when you have, 5 to 10 attorneys, how do you do that? And I think we had some conversations about that following the course. So it was really useful. And I would just encourage people, if you're on the fence, just take the course because you're going to learn something.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And absolutely. I know that attorneys sometimes are hesitant to invest in learning. Mm-hmm. And you know what? I've taken I've had great coaching experiences. I've had not great coaching experiences. I've gone to, I always took far more CLEs than were required. And I've been to CLEs where I walked out and was like, oh, geez,
That was a total waste of time and money.
Total waste of time, other than that one thing that I got out of it.
Yeah.
I've never wasted, it's like travel. I've wasted a lot of money in my life. I've never wasted a penny on travel.
Mm-hmm.
I've wasted a lot of money in my life. I've never wasted a penny on personal or professional development.
Yeah.
Ever.
When you invest
Ever.
in you, it comes back one way or the
30%.
other.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you.